The Ministry of Time was recommended to me by someone at my local bookstore, and from looking online, it seemed like there was quite a bit of buzz surrounding it before it even came out. Some of that buzz comes from controversy that bubbled up before the book was even released. The book was optioned by the BBC for television before it even came out, and unfortunately, the book and the would-be television show share a name with a Spanish language show of the same name that ran from 2015 to 2020. There are some similarities in the basic premise, but the accusations of plagiarism seem like a bit of a stretch, especially considering the wide canon of time travel stories as a genre. The Ministry of Time, the book, not the TV show, or the other TV show, supposes that the British government has figured out time travel, and in order to test the efficacy of it, pluck people out of the past and bring them to the present to study them. By selecting people that are moments from their death, they are causing the least amount of harm to the timeline, since these people were about to be erased from their era anyway. Once these time refugees, or expats as the book refers to them, have been pulled into the modern day, they are paired with government officials called bridges that are there to live with the expats and help acclimate them to modern times. Our main character is an unnamed bridge who is paired with an Arctic explorer from the 1800s named Graham Gore, who was set to die leading a mission in 1847. Our unnamed protagonist is shy and lacks confidence, but her inner monologue is descriptive and often funny in a way that makes her viewpoint thoroughly entertaining. Sometimes a protagonist is so down on themselves that the book can feel like kind of a slog or a bummer to get through. This is the case for another book I'm reading right now, and it makes it more of a task than a pleasure to read. The main character here is a fun hang, which is great because most of the book is through her perspective. While the book does have a sci-fi premise, it is mostly a simple framework to set up the cast of characters and their relationships to each other. The author doesn't really want you to spend too much time thinking about the logistics or science behind time travel. She is much more concerned with the dynamics of putting people from modern day in the same room with people that should have died centuries ago. This is where the book really shines more than anything else going on within the confines of the plot. It might seem kind of obvious that putting people from different centuries together in a room would provide for some funny interactions, but at no point did the book feel like it was taking some easy, well-worn path. The three expats we spend substantial time with are Graham Gore, the Arctic explorer paired with our protagonist, Arthur, a World War I captain with a gentle soul, and Maggie, a rambunctious 17th century woman with an appetite for modern culture and an accent unrecognizable to modern ears. Seeing how each of these characters interact with their bridges, with each other, and with the world around them is the heart of what makes this story interesting. Graham being transfixed by Spotify and the ability to listen to music whenever he wants is a moment that goes from predictable to touching, as he uses the technology to listen to symphonies from the era he came from. Maggie becomes fascinated with films, and even embraces modern dating culture, the apps included. Arthur, a gay man, reflects on how different today's society's views are on sexuality compared to his own time. The age that the three of them have stepped into, or more accurately have been abducted into, in some ways has more to offer them and is more accepting of them as humans than the eras that they originally existed in. What the book really tries to get at, though, is the idea that for these characters, there is no time and space where they are a perfect fit within the society and culture that surrounds them. Our main character is of Cambodian descent, but her outward-facing ethnic identity is vague enough that people around her don't exactly know what to do with her most of the time. There is a passage in the book where her internal monologue lists off all the uncomfortable, semi-racist things that people have said to her over the years, presuming that commenting on her physical appearance and the space she occupies within the world is something socially acceptable. There are other points in the book that get into racial identity in the modern age, especially in moments between the protagonist and Semelia, a black woman and fellow bridge working for the ministry. With that said, I think to properly digest those moments, I would need another pass at the book. Frankly, listening to this on audiobook was a bit of a struggle at times, especially with keeping track of the different characters and their roles within the story. What I could gather is that the idea of race and how that relates to how someone fits into the world around them is put up against the experience of the expats, and how their status as time refugees affects their own ability to integrate into modern England. In this way, I think the book does a decent enough job at landing the plane. The commentary it presents is well thought out and doesn't seem overly oppressive in the face of the story surrounding it. Where this book struggles the most in my eyes is its lack of commitment to one type of story over another. While I think it is more than possible to write a story that exists within the framework of multiple genres, I think it is hard to write all those parts well enough that it justifies the fragmentation. In this case, the book is part science fiction, part romance, and part refugee parable. While it does a perfectly passable job at all those things, at no point did I feel any sense of overwhelming surprise or marvel at what I had listened to. The sci-fi premise is cool but underexplored, and as a person who reads quite a lot of science fiction, this felt flimsy and disposable. I think that the romance aspect of the book is arguably its best feature, and this is coming from someone who has read very little in the genre. I think if the author had leaned into that more and disposed of the time conspiracy stuff, it would have been a stronger effort. Or vice versa, had this been a pure thriller, it would have been much more compelling. I won't spoil anything, but the few twists and turns that this book offers feel incredibly underbaked. Before every major section of this book, there is a flashback sequence that follows Graham in his own time, giving us a little glimpse into his existence prior to his time refugee days. This is a great idea on paper, but much like everything else in this book, it feels like an idea that would have hit that much stronger had it been explored more thoroughly. These sections of the book are fairly short, and while they do provide some context from which to view Graham in present day, I feel that these sections could have been longer, with the potential to weave whatever was going on in his past into the present more thoroughly. Every time one of these sections would come on, I would feel myself checking out a little bit, waiting for the next real section of the book to start. The ultimate test of a book in my eyes is how often you end up thinking about it after you have finished it. By that measure, The Ministry of Time is kind of a dud in my eyes. I've spent almost zero time ruminating about what I read, and even writing this review was a prolonged process due to my lack of passion for the material. However, I think for a first-time author that had only intended this book as something fun to pass around to friends, there's a lot to like here. I hope that Kaliane Bradley continues to write and becomes an even stronger writer in the process. The bones of a compelling novel are present here, but the execution just wasn't all there. Should you read it? Maybe. It was a quick one, and if you just want something entertaining to pass the time, go for it. This was a free audiobook in my Spotify Premium subscription, and in my first time using 1.5x speed, this went down pretty quickly while I was playing Mario Kart.